Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. This is your host, Young Brando, and we are going to talk watches. This is going to be a pretty AP-centric episode, a pretty Audemars Piguet-centric broadcast. So get ready for that. We are going to talk about a new interview with the Audemars Piguet CEO, Ilaria Resta. It's more recent and certainly post rumors, post Geneva Watch Days interview. So there is a lot of talk, a lot of um, defense um, played by the CEO against the rumors that she is soon going to be replaced. In fact, the title of the interview is AP Chief Comes Out Swinging. This came out on the Business of Fashion a little more than a week ago, maybe 10 days ago by now. And I, in fact, bought a membership just so I can access this interview and share it with you. So, pardon me, this is going to be an exclusive. I'm going to share that interview with you. I'm also going to talk about AP's new releases, both something that I did talk about in the form of a leak and discussed it already in detail, the RD number 5, the chronograph tourbillon in the jumbo case, the Royal Oak jumbo extra thin, in a very interesting combination of complications that I talked about from both a historical perspective, because it's something that AP has done before, but also from the perspective of its innovation, which is something that no one has done before, and AP really raised the bar that they had already been holding for quite a while. So it's quite exciting. And it does live up to the promise that Ilaria Resta, in fact, gave in the interview that we explored in depth before, namely the Gstaad guy interview that she did, possibly, late May to June. And she was talking about how AP needs to take the conversation back to horology and implicitly away from the hype. And you will see in this interview, she very much actually goes back to some of those points and elaborates them very interestingly. So just to give you a sneak peek right now, because I'm going to do what I do with talking about some of the news and some of the interesting watches that I've been sharing on Instagram. Also to warm up my vocal cords, speed up a little bit. Many people have been DMing me about how much of a slow talker that I am, and some of it is just my personality, right? I like that contemplative, discursive pace where I can break things down and explain. But I'm gonna make an honest effort from now on to speed things up just a little bit when I'm alone. When I'm talking with someone, and that's one of the reasons I like having an interlocutor, it's so much better. But anyway, so give me a thumbs up in advance, because this is really a packed episode where we will talk about, again, the business of fashion interview with Ilaria Resta. We are going to talk about the most recent 2 releases, the Star Wheel in pink gold, the Code 1159 Star Wheel in pink gold, the RD number 5, and also throw things back to the more compact versions of the perpetual calendar that AP has released a little earlier in the year, both in the form of a Royal Oak and a Code 1159. Now, I think I will pick things up from here. I don't even know if this is something that I shared with you before, but let's start there. right? Why not? This is, of course, Jeremy Strong. And I was making the suggestion that he should finally maybe step back from his character, from being Candor Roy, because it seems that since he has had that role in Succession, which brought him, of course, a lot of success and a huge deal of mainstream celebrity, he can barely keep himself away from Richard Mille. He almost exclusively wears them. Um, I'm not sure if there's an official relationship between him and the brand, but there might as well be, because it's hard to see him away from a Richard Mille in a public appearance ever since he has had this major success with Succession. And in this case, he was at the New York Film Festival for his new movie, Springsteen. I think, what is it? Deliver Me from Nowhere, I think is the subtitle of the movie, where he's playing Springsteen's manager. And he was wearing this Richard Mille, which diverges from the common aesthetic, so to speak, because it is a rectangular piece. This is the RM1602 in terracotta TPT, beautiful color. This very rich shade of Moroccan red, I like to call it, simply because it is one of my favorite colors, but you can also call it perhaps brick red, on a complementary red rubber strap as well. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this watch, which is otherwise quite simple, because it is a time-only piece, it is in fact just a two-hander, is its dial, which, of course, as it is signature Richard Mille, is an open work dial, but it has this maze-like appearance of lattice work that, with the angles and finishes and surface treatments that it's given, becomes really captivating. And one of my friends, one of the community members of this channel, St. Peter, has also made this comment: legibility aside, the dial is a fascinating creation, and I can't help but agree with that. But it really is a beautiful watch, and something you don't usually expect to see from Richard Mille. And they did have the 16 series for quite a while, but this O2 iteration, the second generation, is much more compact, and I think it sits so much better on the wrist for that. So this was Jeremy Strong and his RM1602 in terracotta TPT. Hi, Ryan. Gmar Khatima Tova. Nice to see you. Hey, as long as you just pulled it up and put it on mute, watch it a little bit, give it a like. For now, that's all good. And you can leave this as a comment on that video as well. I'm sure it will give it just a slight push, But yes, my friend Desjardins and I did this lovely little review / exploration of one battle after another on this channel a couple of days back. So if you are interested in listening to that and watching that, especially if you have already watched the movie, that will be great. This is the next one I'm sharing with you, Yannick Zinner, Italian tennis player who is wearing his Daytona, which is quite well known by now. It is the pink gold on oyster flex with the Sanda style, 126515 LN. But he is actually also wearing the Tudor Ambassador J. Chu's sneaker collaboration with Nike, which is an Air Max 95 Fantasy Strings of Dreams, as he calls it. And it's kind of inspired by his musical talent. The first collaboration he had was, I think, called something like Grand Piano. This one clearly has a guitar-related reference, as it also comes with this guitar pick attached to it. And again, as Jake Brooks, as JB was paying attention to it in the comments, it almost feels like he is color coordinating with his watch, right? There is a sense of continuity between the watch and the pair of sneakers he's wearing, which is really cool to see. But I was already quite enchanted by the fact that a Rolex testimony and Tudor Ambassador were collaborating in their own way, coming from very different realms, of course, like an Italian tennis player and Taiwan-born king of Mandopop, coming together with something like this. Quite cool. Next up is Robert Lewandowski. Lewandowski is the captain of the Polish national football team, also a striker for FC Barcelona. And he gave this interview to the sports world at AP House in Barcelona, and he was wearing this beast of a watch, the 26238 CD, which is the Royal Oak offshore chronograph in blue ceramic, and specifically in that shade of blue ceramic that they call Bleu Nuit Nuage 50, which is the original dial color of the 1972 Royal Oak, personally chosen by the designer, by the father of that creation, Gérard Janta, from a Sternfrère catalog. And the other part of the story is, of course, when they were trying to come up with this color, and this was what they wanted to introduce in place of the 2022 blue, which came out in this shade of kind of like electric blue. That was apparently an error of sorts, right? They couldn't get this particular shade right, so they had to come up with another kind of blue as a placeholder of sorts. Now they have what they exactly want, which pays homage to now more than 50 years of history in which this particular dial color played a central role. As I'm sharing those links, by the way, to the Instagram posts, feel free to pull them up, give it a like, share a comment. It always helps, or share it with others. That helps a great deal as well. I was very happy to find this as well. Cigar Aficionado cover from December 1997, which almost coincides with the release of Tomorrow Never Dies, the second Bond movie with Pierce Brosnan as the agent 007. And he is wearing this beautiful bimetal two-tone Cartier Tank Française chronograph. Of course, a quartz-powered watch, but I really like the dial design on these things, with those two lower counters and a pointer date at 12 o'clock. Somewhat of a busy dial, but so well balanced that it doesn't really feel all that busy. And obviously for me, the height of two-tone execution for a watch is really an AP Royal Oak. I think it's a very unique canvas to play with two different kinds of metal. And AP has been playing that game for so long that they also do masterful juxtapositions of tone on tone as well. But I think Cartier does it really well too, with Santos especially, but this is not half bad either. I like those Godron-like inserts that alternate with center links to make up the bracelet especially. But of course, one of the main reasons that something like this is interesting is that Pierce Brosnan, obviously, as James Bond, had a contract with Omega. And, for that reason, for example, in Thomas Crown Affair, when he wore a Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso, the dial had to be effaced with the actual brand covered. When they had a black tie affair in the same movie, he couldn't even actually wear that getup properly. But I guess something somewhere slips through the cracks, and even this kind of public appearance, even in this kind of public appearance, he might end up wearing another watch, even though it is James Bond and he should be wearing an Omega. But I digress. That has happened before, and I'm sure it will continue to happen in the future as well. Even though in our era, the brands are a lot more protective of that relationship on very contractual terms as well. Of course, Paris Fashion Week is going on as we speak, and it coincides with the late Virgil Abloh's 45th birthday, which was last Tuesday. And GQ, the Virgil Abloh archive, and Levi's threw a party together, apparently, for the exhibition Virgil Abloh The Codes, which is the big European retrospective on the designer's work. And the party, of course, included a bunch of very famous people, important celebrities, and the actor Aaron Paul was part of those celebrations, and he was wearing a classic IWC piece, namely the Pilot's Watch Chronograph 41 Top Gun edition in Ceratanium, IWC's particular alloy of ceramic and titanium. So they're black ceramic, basically, but this is particularly a watch that is all blacked out, this time with the pushers, the case, and the crown as well, which, of course, fits with the rest of his aesthetic, too. I was very fascinated to find this. This is Antoine Arnault, the eldest son of Bernard Arnault, who, of course, own and control Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton. Antoine Arnault is the CEO of Christian Dior, as well as the owner of Paris FC. Paris FC has a shared history with Paris Saint-Germain, but for a long time they have languished in the lower divisions of French football. They have been recently promoted into the Ligue 1, and in fact, they were bought by the Arnaud family through their sports investments, Agache Sport, when they were in Ligue 2. And now they are playing their first season in, I think, 46 years in the top division of French football. And he was on the sidelines on match day 6 in Nice at Allianz Riviera, supporting Paris FC against Nice. And he was wearing a very interesting piece, a Rolex Sea Dweller, in fact, a so-called Great White with a maxi dial. You can see those puffy and oversized loom plots. Hard to mistake them for anything else. And it's called a Great White because these were the pieces roughly after 1977, that had all white writing on the dial. Of course, early examples of the Sea Dweller are usually called double red. You might see the acronym DRSD because they have 2 lines of red writing on the dial, Sea Dweller, Submariner 2000, meaning 2,000 feet of a depth rating. But this particular piece, being a Great White, is also pretty fascinating because it does have a 5th line of writing. Great Whites usually don't have this 5th line. Not Submariner, not anything. This one has Tiffany and Company. And I guess that's how Antoine Arnaud gave himself permission to wear a Rolex, wear a very special one at that, which was once retailed by Tiffany and Company and also signed on the dial properly by that esteemed New York house of jewelry. Because after all, Tiffany and Company has been owned by the Arnaud family, by the LVMH since 2021. Here is a second look. Last but not least, we have Matthew McConaughey. Please hit the link. The AP CEO Ilaria Resta interview is next. And this will be a good tie-in because this is a relatively new release by AP. Matthew McConaughey recently sat down for an interview with Man About Town, which is a British-style magazine. And the interview was actually conducted by his eldest son, Levi. Very endearing. Great interview. Go and read, whenever you find the chance, whenever you find the time. And he was wearing specifically the new compact version of the AP Code 1159 perpetual calendar in 18 karat pink gold with the green embossed dial on a green alligator strap. And I don't like complaining about these things, but I find it a worrying trend that in a lot of these magazine shoots, for whatever reason, I don't know if they are trying to show the watch a certain way or if they are, I want to give them a benefit, I want to give them the benefit of doubt, but they might also be clueless and possibly don't even know how a wristwatch should be worn. And I'm afraid that it will become a trend of a sort, like kind of how people started wearing the fabric tags on their sports jackets and coats, right? Which is like a very unseemly situation and kind of shows that, you don't really know what you are wearing or what you should be doing. So you might as well not wear that at all. I hope it doesn't carry over to the world of watches, and we won't see a bunch of fools wearing their watches the wrong way around just to show it a certain way or just because they saw it in a magazine shoot. Hopefully that's not happening anytime soon. So I hope it's just an honest mistake and nothing more than that. But he is wearing the watch in reverse. You can see that it is pink gold even better on the second shot after the swipe. But the interesting thing about the 38 millimeter version of the Code 1159 perpetual calendar is that it has the exact same movement as the 41 millimeter. It is the new generation caliber 7138. This part is not a real deal breaker for me, but it does preserve the weekly calendar, which the compact version of the Royal Oak perpetual calendar, the 38 millimeter Royal Oak perpetual calendar, does not. But the important thing more so is the fact that they could actually have something like this, have something complicated in a case that is not only shaves down 3 millimeters in terms of diameter, but also basically almost another millimeter for the thickness of the watch as well. So one of the drawbacks of the Code 1159 for me, and again, I don't even like the design to begin with, so please understand that I am in fact already biased against it. But one of the objective drawbacks of the watch, I think, was literally its size. And perhaps you can understand why they wanted to release it that way initially, because, you know, I guess certain segments of customers are size queens, and they want to be able to see, the brands can get self-conscious about perhaps their lack of size, their lack of length and girth. So they want something that will show big in those, you know, angled wrist shots and whatever. And it's been a trend that we see more compact case sizes for no reason at all later down on the line, right? It's been 6 years since Code 1159 has been released. And basically, we have now a perpetual calendar version that is literally smaller than the initially released time only or time and dates version. Right? It's really unbelievable, because you have the chronographs, which are 12.6 millimeters, and that's somewhat understandable, right? Chronograph movements, especially self-winding chronograph movements, are by default thicker than most other movements, complicated or not. But, you know, most of the time and date versions of the Code 1159, when they came out, were 10.6, 10.7 anyways. So now to have something 38 millimeter and 9.9 millimeter in thickness, it's a revelation, right? They didn't have to release the watch initially that thick and that big. Same thing with the Cubitus, right? You have now a whole new generation that's not lacking in any way from the previous time and date model, but they are significantly smaller. And the only response to that why question is a certain kind of insecurity on the part of the brand because they expect their customer to want a bigger watch, which may or may not be a misguided effort on their part. All right, now we are in that crucial part of our broadcast where we are going to talk about Ilaria Resta's recent interview with Business of Fashion. AP chief comes out swinging. The Swiss watchmaker, which grew 12 sales% in the year to August, will exhibit at Watches and Wonders Geneva next spring, Chief Executive Ilaria Resta said in a wide-ranging interview. The interview is conducted by one Robin Swithenbank, which takes us back to the first week of September, when AP was quick to shut down a report suggesting Chief Executive Ilaria Resta was leaving the company. She would be going nowhere, the family-owned Swiss watchmaker said. In the days following, Resta was in Hong Kong, unveiling a new collection of watches as part of AP's 150th anniversary celebrations, where she told reporters the rumors were unfounded, countering the revenues were up by 12% in the year to August. Her message, move on because I'm not. The interviewer quickly backtracks though and says questions may persist about her future following a further report over the weekend from the media site Miss Tweed, which was the outlet initially leaking the news from Geneva Watch Days. Miss Tweed came out and backed up, doubled down on the original claim. But for now, Resta remains in the position she assumed at the beginning of last year. If anything, the chatter seems to have energized her. The Italian former Procter & Gamble executive has come out swinging. And again, there's that implicit reminder that she's an industry outsider, right? That she came from the beauty and specifically fragrance sector, and that her term has so far only lasted for about 2 years. And it remains to be seen if she will be eventually replaced after the 150th anniversary or after a proper replacement has been found, which was Miss Tweed's elaboration on their initial claim. Following the Hong Kong event, Ilaria Resta announced on Tuesday that AP would be exhibiting at Watches and Wonders Geneva next spring, returning to a major Swiss watch fair, first time since 2019. And just to explain a little bit there, AP has been at the forefront of the industry in transitioning almost completely to a direct-to-consumer retail model. Nowadays, they sell their watches for the most part through boutiques and exclusive retail spaces and experiential spaces, really, that they call AP houses. And since these kinds of trade fairs, these kinds of trade shows have been mostly about dealing with dealers, dealing with authorized dealers and similar retail channels in the past, historically, they had shifted their priorities. But of course, nowadays, Watches and Wonders is not only about bringing together networks of authorized dealers for a concentrated workshop, kind of arrangement and training for the new year in terms of how to sell new models. Now it is a watch event that involves the public both on site and also through internet, through social media, globally as well. And it seems that with AP's new business model, new direct-to-consumer retail model settled, now it's the right time to return to a fair that is much different, much more customer and public-centric than they have left it. Resta indeed acknowledges that this was a difficult time for luxury watchmaking. She says, I remain concerned about the health of the industry, especially the suppliers that are under huge distress. By the way, if you have any questions, if you want me to attend to any particular aspect of Ilaria Resta's situation or news and new releases that relate to Audemars Piguet, feel free to send them in with super chats. I also have a very humble goal of 5 super chats for within this first hour, and that will add an extra hour of Watch Talk at the end of the regular show. So if you want me to stay on at least until midnight, that's one way to do it. If you have any questions, AP related or watch related, send them in, and I will be happy to either fold it into this discussion if it is close enough, or diverge a little bit from the main topic and answer your question first and foremost. Resta continues, do I see it as a crisis? Frankly, no, because a crisis assumes a structural reason for suffering, and I do not see that. Today's challenges to the watch industry are all contingent and time-limited phenomena that are creating a pause on an otherwise extremely successful trajectory for the watchmaking industry. Now, she's not wrong, right? Because what the horological industry is facing now is not something that is like the quartz crisis of the yesteryear, right? Obviously, the challenges relating to the watch industry have macroeconomic roots. They have geopolitical reasons. But it seems a little bit, I think, myopic to say that when things are going wrong, when sales are declining, certainly in terms of volume, whereas you would never hear a horological executive, so I'm not trying to personalize the thing here, I'm talking about it more broadly, you will rarely hear a horological executive stepping forward and say, hey, we are doing so extremely well. This is like, the historic best that the Swiss watch industry has been experiencing in the last 3 years. And it's all because of contingent, time-limited phenomena that are happening outside, right? No one wants to say, hey, the macroeconomic signals are all in the right place. There's no threat of imminent war, World War III. We're all doing so well, and it's thanks to our political leaders and thanks to the health of global economy. It's not like we are getting anything right in terms of high-level watchmaking. We just happen to be lucky. No one says that. So I think it behooves them not to say something like that when things are declining, when things are contracting, right? Because there's always something you can do from within to counter those challenges, even if they originate from the outside. For example, factors such as US tariffs on Swiss watch exports, soaring gold prices, and a strong Swiss franc have coincided with weakened customer confidence in key global markets, right? And of course, we are referring here the impending but seemingly impossible return of the Chinese market, at least not in the same way, right? After what the luxury market has suffered, especially in segments that were so heavily dependent on the Chinese market, people were expecting that to pick up and come back in full force, perhaps even with vengeance, but that's not really what happened. And also, it is important to say, and Ilaria Resta will actually attend to this, that some of the growth that the luxury industry has experienced broadly and watches have experienced more specifically have been almost disproportionate, right? Have been so historic and so out of the ordinary that perhaps a kind of contraction, a kind of normalization was inevitable. And I don't, again, no one can deny that either. Ilaria Resta continues, it's just a perfect storm, and it all comes after years of glory growth, which frankly was also a growth that was a bit excessive. There we go. So we had perfect positive momentum, and now a perfect storm. Resta said she had made changes to adapt to the new climate. I've been forced to inject new strategies, she said. 80% of my leadership has changed, which is kind of a confusing phrase, I have to say. Was there a shakeup in terms of executive roles where she laid off a bunch of people and brought in new ones? And I think to a certain extent that has been the case in the last 2-3 years in AP. But maybe she's also talking in a way about how she tackles challenges as a leader. Maybe her approach to leadership has changed significantly. I feel like she's saying that as well, but it might be something lost in translation too. She says this change was needed because the company had reached a level of maturity and success that was extraordinary, but when the context outside changes, you cannot continue the same strategies, not because they're wrong, but because you need different muscles to face the storm. I think she mostly means literally shuffling around people, personalities at the executive level. Pardon me. And it's mostly true, I think. In this time, AP received, I think, a new North America CEO, a new China CEO, a new director of complications, so on and so forth. So I think that's exactly what she means. And, again, I think you see also here the language of a good leader, right? She massages it really well. She could have just cut it short and dry and said, hey, we are facing different challenges, so I saw it right to change some of my leadership cadres because they were not up for these challenges, right? But she really does it expertly by saying, hey, they had their success. They are the ones who brought us here. They have been extremely successful, but now we are facing a different climate, and I need a different set of leaders to develop different kinds of strategies. So it was time for a transition. I think this is diplomacy, corporate diplomacy at its best. And she says here, and she had some substance to back it up, we have switched our focus to elevating horological excellence, innovation, and client centricity. AP now controls most of its distribution, selling direct to consumer through its boutiques and what it calls AP houses, private lounge-style spaces in cities such as London, New York, and Milan. And I think by now they're counting more than 20 different locations globally. Client centricity, Resta says, is all about defining innovation by observing clients and talking to them so that we know what matters most to them. Adding that the AP House model enabled the company to glean deeper customer insights. We don't just launch things because they're cool, but because they mean something in the everyday use of the people who wear our watches. Bringing in younger clients was also a key focus. Resta says, for Gen Z, what surrounds the shopping experience is much more important than the purchase act itself. There's a lot of learning and engagement that happens before a Gen Zer opens the door of a store. So we are omni-channel, and we are making sure we serve this generation at any and every touch point well before the phases of consideration. Watches face stiff cross-category competition. She went on, we are competing with travel, a bag, a car, and any other shopping opportunity Gen Z have. And this bears repeating, but this is actually a very old insight for the Swiss horological industry. In fact, it is by now half a century old. This was basically their premise in redefining the wristwatch as a luxury product in the wake of the quartz crisis. It was not about mechanical precision anymore. It was not merely about respecting and transmitting and even perfecting a centuries-old craft. It was about actually creating the kind of exclusive and high-quality products that could compete for the attention and spending of a luxury consumer, right? This has been Rolex's approach to selling a watch since the 70s and 80s, right? They have known for long that they are actually competing for, should I buy this gem set watch or get a new yacht? Should I get this Daytona or a car? Should I go out and travel the world or get a new watch, right? This has been the mentality, perhaps at a subconscious level, and sometimes even on a very conscious and articulated level. This has been the mentality of a luxury consumer. Resta continues, a watch is in the same bubble of consideration as all these experiences, and because of that, there's a ceremony around the selling and buying experience that becomes relevant to them. They bring their friends, they want engraving, they want a relationship with the sales assistant who becomes a kind of friend. So we're obsessed about master classes, the behind the scenes of a watch, explaining a watch much more thoroughly than we used to in the past. Now, I'm not sure about that last part, but certainly what they have been saying about creating a kind of third space, as it were, out of the retail space has certainly been part of a broader initiative on the side of luxury retail spaces, right? It is not only in the form of special events, but now more permanently, in terms of serving their guests light drinks and even snacks, having integrated coffee shops or bars creating these sorts of experiential spaces within the larger retail space. This has been the case with a lot of watch boutiques and certainly beyond, but the AP House experience actually makes that something permanent and something that is more all-encompassing, something that is more enveloping. By the way, I don't think we are getting anywhere near what was a very humble super chat goal. I guess that's okay. I guess I can just go through this interview and maybe talk about the two newest releases a little bit and then leave. No problem. Just hit the like button. That will be enough for now. Resta's approach is markedly different to that of her predecessor, François-Henri Benamias, who casts a long shadow over Audemars Piguet. During his 11-year tenure as chief executive, he looked to position the company in the heart of popular culture, forging alliances with LeBron James, Travis Scott, and the Marvel Universe, an approach that earned him as many critics as fans. This is my favorite part, by the way, about Ilaria Resta's leadership. I really love how she very consciously differentiates herself from her immediate predecessor. And obviously, I'm biased because I'm absolutely not a fan of Benamias. And I'm also, in general, I'm not a fan of leaders who are so self-enamored and more interested in their self-promotion than the legacy that they're presiding over, no matter what the sales earnings show, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're talking about a legacy manufacturer like AP, a company that has stood the test of time for a century and a half, it is about guaranteeing the sustainability and longevity of that company rather than having, the most financially successful decade in the brand's history, right? If you are leaving a legacy behind that you cannot maintain anywhere near the same way without stretching yourself too thin and becoming something that you are not, what is it really worth, right? Beyond lining your own pockets and maybe deriving some extra financial benefits to the owners. And then what? There's still the next 150 years to look forward to. By her own admission, Resta's style is more pragmatic. The mission for the company, she says, is to survive the next 150 years. Bravissima. That I couldn't have put it better myself. It's boring and less sexy, Resta says, but it's indispensable. It's not visible in a single watch, but it's ultimately the most important thing to work on the fundamentals of a company. She's really great. Whatever is happening behind the scenes, and perhaps it's really nothing, maybe it is really making a mountain out of a molehill. Maybe she's really not going anywhere. But whatever it is, whether the rumors were true and she is given a second chance, a second lease, I really want her to succeed to the best level as she stays, for as much as she stays as the AP CEO, because I think she has been really a breath of fresh air. Since Resta's appointment, the hype that surrounded many of AP's launches over the past decade has cooled. The company has dropped some high-profile sports ambassadorships as it embraces a strategy refocused on friends of the brand. And this is more than semantics, Resta insisted, right? They have moved away from some of their ambassadors, especially from some athletes, and now they're privileging people I think more in the creative fields, by the way. I think there's a conscious effort to have artists, musicians, and creatives writ large who are friends of the brand rather than just a handful of high-profile athletes and celebrities. And I think that's an interesting relationship, because what you're implying there is also a little bit different, right? That's of course, you are always giving your clients something to aspire. Whenever you have an ambassador or friend of brand, whatever you want to call it, that is an aspirational move. In a way, your potential customers are putting themselves in the shoes of that person. And maybe, they are trying to say, we are a brand that is creative, that's at the forefront of innovation, that is always trying to put something individual, personal, unique out there. And that's why we relate to this new generation of creatives more than anything else. So Resta says, people think we work with artists and with music as a platform for client engagement. In reality, when we talk with artists and creators in other fields, we learn more about the creative process, and this is helping us accelerate the company with new discoveries and innovations. That's also great, right? In fact, she's talking about a relationship that is a little more transactional, not in the way that it is tit for tat, don't take me wrong, but in the sense that there is a sense that there's a feedback loop, right? That they're not only using these creatives as ambassadors, but they are actually trying to learn from them to become better creators themselves. And why not, right? At least it sounds good on paper, right? Let's start there. We'll see what fruit it bears over the next 5 years or so, but I think it sounds great. I'm not obsessed about whether we do tennis, golf, or basketball. Now, you got to stop there. Golf and basketball, I couldn't possibly care less about, but do not, and I repeat, do not touch Arina Sabalenka. Please don't. She has been, I don't know if they have any measure of gauging this, but trust me, I know my metrics, I know my analytics, especially thanks to the growth that I have experienced on Instagram, which has been more than tenfold in less than a year. It's in terms of the content that I can post, right, as a male creator on women's watches, there's nothing that gets as much engagement as the Audemars Piguet watches that Sabalenka wears, right? She has been a great face for the brand in so many ways. So I hope she doesn't mean anything about moving completely away from sport just for the sake of it. She cites the example of a limited edition version of the Rolex Perpetual Calendar created in collaboration with the music artist and renowned watch collector John Mayer, released last year. And of course, he is a creative conduit of the brand, right? Much more than an advocate of watch design, Resta explains, and innovation than a traditional ambassador. John Mayer interacts a lot with our production team, brings the point of view of a client. This is an old partnership that existed before I came, and I have pushed it to a new level. There we go. The brand's relationship with retired tennis star Serena Williams continues, Resta said, while musicians Mark Ronson and Ray recorded a soundtrack for the company's 150th anniversary. I thought that was kind of brilliant as well. It was very original. The song was not necessarily talking about AP at all, but it was just a cool collaboration. And, a unique idea to see how AP can inspire people to do things on their own terms in their own fields. I think it was a good look for the brand. Resta says, we don't even fixate on the length of the partnership. We want the partnership to last as long as possible with friends of the brand, very organically and much less contractually and transactionally. If the relationship doesn't work, we will end it. I think that's hard to disagree as well. Last year, Audemars Piguet reported 2.4 billion Swiss francs in sales, and I think that places them in fourth place, according to Morgan Stanley. A slight uptick on the previous year, bucking the industry's negative trend. Resta said company would be up again this year. We will continue growing, she said, but I don't believe growth is a healthy measure of success. This is all music to my ears. I don't know if the foundation is listening in the same way, but this is great. Growth can be a disease. I'm pivoting the brand towards a new success measure, which is innovation and the reputation of the brand. Honestly, she talks the talk. If she will walk the walk in the next 2-3 years, I don't know. No one can guarantee that, but she certainly knows how to say the right things, which, a lot of CEOs can do, but not always, and not all of them. So this in itself is a certain skill. I hope it is more than that. I hope she can walk the walk as well. And why not? Again, she's saying all the right things. If we meet these success criteria, growth will come. If we don't, growth will ultimately stop. She's also giving right here exact numbers of production, which is very encouraging. And it's not a huge growth either. Resta said AP will produce 53,000 watches this year, 2025, up from 51,000 in 2023. No figures were released in 2024, apparently. The company couldn't keep up with demand for some pieces, including the quartz-powered Mini Royal Oak. She said female clients had increased by 20% year on year, and they now account for around 30% of the company's customers. That is really encouraging. That is brilliant. That really is brilliant. Resta said the company's sales momentum was mainly down to selling more high-end complications and watches with complex mechanical functions that command a higher price. Growth in sales of complications is much more interesting measure of growth for me, she said. That shows we are doing the right complications and elevating our narrative and our contribution to the world of high-end watchmaking. Now, I have talked about this narrative in luxury watch market before, that as the sales volume is shrinking, as the market is contracting, which seems to a certain extent inevitable, the brands shift their focus to selling high-ticket items, right? Maybe we will move less units per year, but we will sell them at a higher price point, and therefore either keep our revenues at the same level or, in fact, gradually increase. And usually they do that by, using very arbitrary price increases, sometimes more than once a year, by pushing two-tone or 18-karat gold pieces, gem set pieces onto their customers. And I'm not saying that AP doesn't do that at all, but if some of that mission creep, some of that growth in the price tags, some of that ballooning is going to be caused by complications, I can't complain as much. Honestly, they are winning me over here a little bit. Because obviously complicated pieces cost more, and AP is kind of guilty of pricing their complicated pieces at a very high point already at retail, right? Their perpetual calendars are already 120,000 and plus, Royal Oak or Code 1159. The new RD5 that we are going to talk about, at least a little bit, is more than $250,000 already at the point of retail. I think the sand gold version of the new perpetual calendar is similarly priced as well, maybe a little bit less than the RD5, the jumbo extra thin tourbillon chronograph. But even that, I prefer those kinds of watches than gem set versions of the Rolex Daytona. Much as I love the Daytona, much as I fanboy over Rolex, I think all things being equal, a complicated watch at a higher price point, to me, is infinitely more fascinating than a gem set precious metal watch at an even higher price point. The article continues, at the upper end of the market, watchmakers have been focusing on lower volume pieces with higher values for a number of years. Did the same thing I said, contributing to the industry's volume slump. Swiss export volumes have halved over the past decade, according to the Federation of the Swiss Watch Industry. Some years, Resta says, we might produce fewer pieces because we are focusing on higher end complications. And that perhaps explains why they didn't publish any numbers in 2024. Perhaps they had cut down on the volume a little bit for that year, and they didn't want they didn't want that to be used to contribute to this larger narrative of a slump. Resta continues, we're also looking at 100% handmade pieces that take 2 years in the life of a single watchmaker. Next spring's appearance at Watches and Wonders Geneva will be welcomed by the show's organizers and by its exhibitors. Rolex, Cartier, Patek Philippe, and Chanel are among the big hitting brands that backed the show at its inception in 2022, but AP, estimated by Morgan Stanley to be the 4th ranked Swiss watch company by sales, so I recalled that correctly, had until now declined to participate. Of course, again, until 2019, they were participating in the precursor to the Watches and Wonders show, which was SIHH. Richard Mille, Breitling, and the Swatch group of brands, which includes Omega and Longines, have also not yet exhibited at the fair. Looking at the bigger picture, Resta said she was confident the industry would bounce back, but stressed the need to stay the course. Is it tough? She said. Yes, it is. But pulling the plug now would be the worst thing that can happen. So we will continue to invest. There's a client for our watches, and the number of clients is increasing. So overall, I think, she paints a really reasonable picture. She is saying all the right things. She is talking the talk. And I think with this re-energized focus on watchmaking, on client relations, and on innovation, by and large, is very encouraging for me. Again, she still has to walk the walk, but she has only spent about 2 years at that level of leadership, and she has been an outsider. So I think she deserves a little more time here. And I hope, again, even if the rumors are true, she's hopefully getting a new lease uh, on life as the top executive of Audemars Piguet. Um, I think the future, the near future at least, looks bright for her. All right, now for the second segment of the program, I will be focusing on AP's new releases. That includes the new Star Wheel, as well as the RD number 5. I'll just take a moment here as a quick break. I'll be right back. All right. Thank you so much for your patience. I am back. Now, if you have been watching this show for a while, you already know that I did a very detailed breakdown of this watch with what was merely a couple of photos and a very general article. But with what I know about AP's history and obviously its recent past as well, I think I've been able to do that with relative ease and with a lot of nuanced detail as well. So if you want to take a look at that, whenever you like, feel free to click to the link that I will share now in the chat. And I would genuinely appreciate that if you would share that video, if you would make sure that video gets the kind of audience that it deserves. That would be brilliant. But basically, beyond giving you exactly the reference number, which it turns out is 26545 XT, I've given you everything, which obviously no one could touch at that level. But if you want that level of detail, the video is there, and I would like you to see it sooner than later. So feel free to watch that, share it with other collectors and enthusiasts. That is my in-depth review of the new AP Royal Oak Jumbo Extra Thin RD number 5 chronograph tourbillon. Of course, I'm going to talk about it now too, but perhaps not with that same level of detail. A couple of things. First of all, I have in the past marveled about AP's relatively unique combination of the chronograph and tourbillon. And I said that it was really incredible, and the only complaint that I had about this watch was more or less the fact that it was 44 millimeters in diameter and quite thick as well. This one is obviously very different. There's a reason why AP preserves and in a way preserves the dignity of 39 millimeter as the original diameter of this watch, with the right proportion of thickness to go with it, almost independent of complications, just to be able to have these sorts of special creations every so often, beyond the line of Jumbo Extra Thin that, of course, is very ably represented now by the reference 16202. I've previously talked about the combination of materials, which was previously explored in a Jumbo, again, 16202 XT, where you have the case and the bracelets, for the most part, in titanium. And you have here the octagonal bezel as well as the tapering interlinks of the bracelets in bulk metallic glass, which is a very specific alloy for AP, where they mix 50% of palladium with 50% of other metals. And I think overall, this tone-on-tone combination with variously treated surfaces, with that famous contrast and interplay of straight grained and mirror polished surfaces, straight grained and high polished surfaces, is very emblematic of the design, and I think it really carries that forward. Of course, it has a petite tapisserie dial, which again AP preserves for the jumbo, and its special variants like this example, 150 examples for the 150th anniversary. An ultra thin combination of a self-winding chronograph and a self-winding tourbillon, a flying tourbillon at that, right? You know, where you don't have a front bridge to the tourbillon cage, which means you can watch that most romantic part of having a tourbillon on the wristwatch, a full revolution without being impeded in any way. By the way, the centrally deployed chronograph hand itself is rendered in titanium, which, of course, plays its part in that zero reset mechanism. I have talked previously about the design and technical innovation of the pushers as well. You will see that they are really flush to the case, and they take after the interlinks of the bracelet rather than the hexagonal bolt-like design of the crown, which is the case usually with Royal Oak chronographs. And that's not only an aesthetic renovation, it also has a lot to do with a new kind of haptic feel, a new kind of tactile feeling they were trying to engineer for chronographs. Of course, with automatic column wheel waterproof chronographs, the feel of those chronograph buttons has become stiffer and heavier in time. AP basically went the other way, right? A lot of brands actually pride themselves on fine-tuning that feeling of rigor, of weight, of heft. Alan Gonzone would be at that end of the spectrum. AP tried to approach the problem as something from the end of the smartphone end of spectrum, where these would feel the same way as the volume buttons on the side of your iPhone, right? That they would, in fact, feel almost weightless because they have less travel as you are pushing the buttons. And I think that's a very interesting innovation. You have to give them to that. I do like that sort of haptic feel of a traditional chronograph, but I commend them for trying something different, for trying something completely new to the world of mechanical watches. And I look forward to testing it out in person once I get my hands on it, and you will be sure that I will share videos as well, just as I did with the Sand Gold Perpetual Calendar. You see again, you know, the pushers are almost invisible. Of course, what is at the center of this watch, as with any other research and development watch, is the movement, caliber 8100. At the center of which is a heart-shaped cam. With a zero reset mechanism. It's also a peripherally winding movement, meaning that even though it has a full rotor, it is a rotor that travels around the base of the movement, that it, in fact, one, gives you a full view, again, without impeding, of the mechanics of the chronograph, which is really the best part of the spectacle. But of course, sitting at that same level as the bridges, it also allows the watch to be that much thinner. Which again, the thickness is exactly 8.1, same as the time and dates Royal Oak Jumbo Extra Thin. Amazing. And again, obviously, this is a limited edition, only 150 pieces, but you should expect to see some of these developments in different parts of the lineup. It's always been that way, right? When the Flying Tourbillon first came out in the form of the RD3, it took a little while, but they made basically more broader production examples in 41 millimeter and even 37 millimeter. Here, they may or may not make other kinds of pieces that combine a chronograph and a flying tourbillon, but they will most certainly use this ultra-thin peripheral rotor chronograph technology that will have this new haptic feel for its pushers and this new zero reset mechanism in different parts of the lineup. I'm almost sure of it. It might take a year or two. In the past, it has taken even less than that, but I think, especially at this time, they will try to spread out some of these exciting releases so they can build up the expectations, so they can actually generate some of the excitement that they seem to be lacking again in the last few years. But it's most certainly going to come. Something going on with my connection. I do apologize. Of course, this is a flyback chronograph, so you can do start, stop, reset as you would with any other chronograph, but you can simply use the flyback function as well.